Hello and welcome to Camp Xbox. In 2003, Mark Millar and J.G. Jones would start releasing the comic book Wanted, which was a dark supervillain-themed series. By 2008, Hollywood got their hands on it and made a film that was very loosely related to the comic. Taking notes from the movie, we got the game Wanted: Weapons of Fate. They took some parts of the movie and barely any of the comics to make an interesting piece of gaming history. I played through it recently, and let me give you a review, some history, and all footage was captured from an Xbox 360, and I want to thank my YouTube channel members for their support. But let's go ahead and hop into this one. The concept for Wanted dates all the way back to the 70s, where the comic book writer Mark Millar describes being tricked by his brother that all heroes were dead and villains were in control of the world. And by 2003, he had written a 6-issue series based off of this, starring Wesley Gibson, a weak man who learns that he is a powerful assassin in a world run by villains. What some would deem, including myself, as trying too hard to be a little overly edgy, was hitting the zeitgeist perfectly in the 2000s. Millar had a lot of success with this, with Kick-Ass. With being on top of your game and comics comes movie deals. Wanted would eventually get a movie in 2008, starring James McAvoy and Angelina Jolie. A movie that is almost nothing like the comic, retaining only a loose retelling, but removing many of the villain elements. I mean, the comic has a literal poop monster, something I'm sure Universal wasn't dying to touch. And the movie did well financially and critically, which is a myth that a lot of articles I've read now have, that this movie bombed, which is wrong. It critically did well and it made money. And with that success came a game. And announced in July of 2008, a month after this movie's release, Wanted: Weapons of Fate would be an extension of the film. It's a weird movie tie-in that's only barely like the movie and almost nothing like the comics, except the protagonist's comic suit comes back. Universal supposedly was so happy with the film's success that they didn't want to rush the game and wanted to give the developer Grin plenty of time for a 2009 release. It had almost no issues leading up to its launch in North America on March 24, 2009, where it released for PC, PS3, and 360, with releases over the following weeks in Europe and Australia. It's funny, I have a lot of personal history with this franchise. I saw the movie in 2008 and loved it. And as I said earlier, the overly edgy style was just right for the time, and right then, it worked for me. I bought the comic. I don't think I loved it as much as the movie, and I think even for then, the writing was a bit much for me, but I still had fun with it. I did play the demo for this game when it dropped, and I remember enjoying it, but I never picked up this game. That is until recently, and I played through it, and let me tell you how I felt about it, breaking it all down, starting with the plot.
The shooter, who is he?
The Immortal, the head of the Paris fraternity. To a fanatic like him, your parents violated the code of the Loom.
And the Paris fraternity is here now, in Chicago, because of me?
Not only because of you.
Weapons of Fate takes place only a few hours after the movie. Wesley Gibson is now a full-fledged assassin, having mastered the ability to bend bullets. He's looking to assassinate someone named the Immortal, and is also hunting down the secrets of his mother and assassin father. Intercut with Wesley's story are snippets of his father's past and his exploits, weaving a plot of the past and also Wesley's globe-trotting adventure, visiting France, Chicago, and multiple places, all on the hunt for the Immortal. The plot here is fine, nothing terrible, but I didn't find it anything special either. If anything, I commend it for keeping up with the edgy style of the comic, but it's not very funny. Wesley's writing in particular is unfunny and honestly a bit annoying. It captures how I felt about him in the comics. In the edginess of everything, it feels more like the comics than it does the movie, though the characters by Morgan Freeman and Terrence Stamp do return. Angelina Jolie does not return though, and we get a replacement character instead of her. It's one of those plots that works hand in hand with its gameplay. more facilitating a location and place to shoot in rather than a riveting narrative. I find it works best in the father segments because it's more about killing a giant group and having colossal action set pieces, where Wesley has these long drawn out moments of him cutting off arms or dialogues about nothing special. The plot feels very loose, and I really do think that's because they had planned on making a sequel to the original movie, and they wanted to make a game that felt like a sequel but wasn't so much of a sequel that it would infringe on the plot of the movie. It left me feeling okay, though not bad by any stretch. It works enough here to work in hand with the gameplay. Weapons of Fate takes on a cover shooter style that was very prevalent in gaming at the time. You hop from barrier to barrier and shoot over the sides at enemies. As far as controls go for shooting and movement, it's all solid, if not a little basic. You aim with the left trigger and shoot with the right. It's fun once you get into the rhythm of it, though the true standout to make this one different is your ability to slow down time as well as bend bullets. You can slow down time in multiple ways. One is by swapping between covers in quick succession, which allows you to slow down time and get the drop on enemies. There's also a method where you use your stamina, which goes up with every time you kill an enemy, and this works like a bullet time mode, having you stop time as you run between covers. Once again, these mechanics don't stand out as groundbreaking, but they do help the gameplay and stop it from being a stale riff on third-person shooters. There's a nice rush when you chain a slow-mo shootout into each other because you are killing enemies so quickly. This game has multiple times where you roll through cutscenes, shooting out various things in slow motion, and I think that's a fun addition too, taking what could have been easy cut and paste QuickTime events and elevating them a little bit. Another element that changes everything is the ability to curve bullets. It's one of the most notable elements of the comics and movie, so it had to be here. Using stamina, you can see a white line on the screen. You can move this so you can arc around covers and objects to shoot out enemies. This is an awesome element of the game and gives you something unique. It's satisfying to curve around things and get rid of a specific enemy that is just being annoying. It helps maintain the energy that this game has. My biggest issue with this game, though, is that it runs out of momentum, which is funny for a 5-hour game. The game starts with some stellar levels and fizzles out in its finale. For one, you have this plane level, which rocks for 2009. You're on a plane and taking dudes out on all sides of the plane as it's being ripped apart. This takes a linear level design and makes it feel unique by having a dynamic and moving feeling. Elements like food carts can be pushed and moved as you cover, and you can take multiple routes with multiple bullet-bending moments. This and a few other levels have a dynamic feeling that makes the linear gameplay stronger. By its final chapters, Wanted has some of its weakest levels though. It's all about starting and ending strong, and this one doesn't end strong. A lot of these sections are in dark, ugly sewers and only offer linear design. No multiple paths or slow motion sections that are just boring hallways. It's odd that this game runs out of steam like this, and the issues of the basic gameplay and level design start to become a bit more noticeable. That's about it here too. It's a short, linear campaign with no multiplayer and an unlockable difficulty. Achievements are about the only incentive to keep you going here, so there's really not much to bring you back. But for 5 hours of gameplay, I will say it doesn't overstay its welcome. Those last levels weren't my favorite, but they're over with fast enough that it's not really tedious. It does some cool things here, but I wouldn't say it's amazing, which in the grand scheme of things is at least entertaining.
Why? Why'd you do it?
Have you asked yourself the same question? Elise would be alive if you hadn't infected her with your seed.
That seed has a name.
Wesley, yes I know, and I have something.
The look of Wanted is a bit on the bland side, not showing anything spectacular, but I would say nothing terrible either. It looks the worst in its cutscenes, which come off very rigid. The animations are choppy and the characters don't move well. I don't think it's a horrible deal, but it really doesn't look great, though it does at least capture the actors from the movies reasonably well. Outside of the cutscenes though, it's once again just fine. Nothing riveting about the look, but completely serviceable. There's small touches when it comes to effects that I do like. I do like the haze you get when you enter slow motion, and I like the line effect that you get from bullet bending. It gives you a nice feeling, and it lets you feel like a cool assassin. As stated earlier, some levels like the plane one knock it out of the park. When it's huge and silly like an off-the-shootout level, it's fun. Yet when it's dark and in the sewers, it feels uninspired, swapping between two states of mind that never work together. Wanted can be a bit weird in its comics and even sometimes in its movie, but you don't get that here. Sometimes it just feels shallow. It's not bad at least, and has some sparks of greatness, so the visual appeal is at least there. One of the most important elements in a game like this would be its gunfire, which I think is handled well. Firing shots and how the sound changes when you bend bullets give great feedback. This game can get loud, and hearing the sounds of all the fire surrounding you is well handled. The sound effect work in general is all handled very well, with noticeable changes in sound when you enter into slow-mo mode, giving you an audio cue along with the visuals to let you know that things have changed up. I do think the music in this game is well done. It feels cinematic and feels ripped right out of the movies. I do think that means it's not very interesting. I wouldn't listen to it on its own. It's not catchy, but it doesn't have to though. It does fit the mood well. Now the voice acting is a bit more mixed, not necessarily for the voice work. I think Terrence Stamp, Common, Peter Stormare, and many other actors show up here, and these guys are doing solid jobs. But James McAvoy does not return, and instead it's Jimmy Simpson as his replacement, and I don't think he's a close fit. But I do think he does a good enough job. I honestly just found the writing to sometimes wear him down. There's a lot of weak and edgy lines that are just not funny. Unfunny dialogue makes it a bit eye-rolling, but honestly, I didn't mind it as much as I thought I would. In my mind, I think of it as it's just Wanted. That's just part of the deal here, and though it doesn't date well, it's at least a good reference to where humor was at the time. Wanted Weapons of Fate is a fun game with some fun ideas. The bullet bending and slow motion segments are strong and the gameplay works well, though otherwise it never does anything amazing. The visuals and plot are nothing special, but they're not terrible either. The game also loses a bit of steam with some later levels being weak, though I think overall it's at least entertaining. Not a true standout, but if you want a nice quick shooter, you can get a kick out of this one. On my Xbox 360 ranking list, where I rank every Xbox 360 game I've covered on the channel, this one goes in at number 17. Crackdown is far more replayable and has a more interesting aesthetic, but Wanted is a much more memorable game than Top Spin 2. Weapons of Fate came out to mixed reviews according to Metacritic with a 62 average. IGN gave it a 7.3, saying that though it was fun, it lacked on content. GameSpot gave it a 6, saying the bullet bending was cool but looked awful. Official Xbox Magazine gave it a 7.5, saying the action was fun, but it was way too short. Wanted sold way under what Universal had wanted it to sell, selling around 130,000 units by the end of 2009. This ultimately had pushed them towards not wanting to produce more games, choosing to look at movie games with caution. Soon after this game released, along with the two other Grin-developed games of 2009, Bionic Commando and Terminator Salvation, which were both critical duds, Grin would close their doors permanently. As far as reception goes nowadays, I see people in the comments calling this a hidden gem all the time, and I know there's people out there that like this one. On Backlog though, it holds a 2.7 with over 700 plays, with some calling the game fun in the reviews, but a lot of people just saying it's mediocre. It has a mixed legacy overall, though I do think it's interesting as a movie tie-in because it's at least trying something a little different. But that does wrap it up for today. If you enjoyed this review, please leave a like. It really helps me out in the algorithm. Subscribe to keep up with more retro Xbox content, and check out my second channel, Camp Extras, for just retro content in general. And I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube channel members. Thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you here next time at Camp Xbox.